Hi, friends! A quick note before we get into today's episode. This episode of Lime Listen and Learn, the People Leadership Lounge, was originally recorded live on LinkedIn in 2025. You would definitely hear moments where my guest and I are responding to a live audience during this episode. So let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lime Listen and Learn, the People Leadership Lounge. I am your host, Abbiola Ballah, founder of Fern Education Studios, where we help managers to lead with ease and intention. And I am so glad, so glad that you are here today. So, for those of you who are new here, space is not a panel, it's not a masterclass. And it's definitely not one of those, leadership webinars where we have like little slide decks or like a Q&A section at the end or, none of that stuff. This is a Lime. And in Trinidad, where I'm originally from, a Lime is when people come together just to chill, just to vibe, just to talk, real talk happening here. So this is going to be pretty unfiltered, pretty honest, full of vibe. That's what we're doing here. And we're talking about leadership through all of this. We're talking about the people side of leadership, the parts of leadership that usually don't make it into the meeting notes. So if you're watching us live, you're a part of the Lime in real time. So please drop your thoughts, drop your comments, everything as we're going. I really want you to be a part of this with us. Before we dive in, I always like to start with a few community agreements that guide the way we show up in this space together. All of my guests have read these and agreed to these. And I always, since as my audience, you're part of the slime, I'm gonna, share them with you. And I would love for you to agree to these too. So our first community agreement, we listen to learn, not just to respond. We bring curiosity and care into the conversation that we are having. We speak from our truth, but we stay open to feedback. We acknowledge when we need a pause. We assume positive intent, but know that that does not always lead to positive impact, but we stay accountable and we share the space, but not the stories that are not yours to share. All right, my friends, let's get into it. So, today we're going to ease into this. Maybe we'll see. Because I'll be honest that today's topic is is one that's in my brain. I've been like moving back and forth between so much about it because, we're talking about words that for some have become taboo, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. And right now, language is shifting. Some companies are scrubbing these words altogether. Some people are being asked to rename what they do, and other people are saying, we're still doing this work of, equity and inclusion, but that's not what we call it anymore. And I get it because, these words have been, weaponized. They've been, like people hear these words and they immediately go on the defensive and without really like stopping to ask what these words actually mean. So the questions that have been like bubbling up for me, and I'm so glad we're gonna jump into this, is do we fight for the language or do we like focus on doing the work, right? And like even if we're not allowed to call it like what, even if we can't call it or we have to like shift the name, call it what it was before, because here's the thing, for me this isn't just language, right? This is how I lead. I've been leading with equity, like the things I do have been rooted in equity and inclusion since before I knew what the words were, since I was teaching in Japan. So it's always just been, or even before that, honestly speaking, it's just always been how I've moved through the world before I've had terms for it. So, all right, I'm rambling and I'm really, really happy to be liming with Minette Norman for this one because, Minette has been in this work for years and I am gonna do the thing and bring her on here before I keep rambling. Minette, I'm so glad to have you here to line with us because as you can probably tell from my little word vomit before, there's a lot going on up here about this, and I'm really, really happy to have you to unpack with us that we can unpack together. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Abbiola.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I remember I saw your post on LinkedIn. I think that was months ago when you said that was, you had to drop the word inclusion from, I think it was like a talk you were giving or a workshop or
That's right.
something like that. They asked you to drop the word inclusion. And that was months ago. So how's it been going? How many times have you had to do that since then?
That was the first, but not the last time that
Oh
happened to
my
me.
goodness.
There is a lot to unpack here, and there's a lot of energy that we both bring to this topic. But to that post, I think what that first one was it was really soon after the Trump administration came in and announced that we are banning anything related to DEI. And so
Yeah.
I was giving a talk in March, a keynote for a big conference, and it was for women in education in one of the US states. And because they are like they take government funding, and they advertised that this was their big conference and that I was going to be the keynote speaker. And my topic usually is related to my book, The Boldly Inclusive Leader, which proudly uses the word inclusive in it. So there was inclusion in the title of my talk, and they said, we still want you to do the talk. You do not have to change any of the content of the talk, but could we ask you to rework the title, not to use the word inclusion, because the title of the talk will show up on our website, which will be indexed, which will be seen by the government, and which could prevent us from getting government funding, et cetera. And so, this is what I posted about. And this is where I was so conflicted because, to your point, their language is more than language. And so there was a part of me that wanted to take this very strong stance of, no, I will not change the language, and therefore I may not be able to give this talk. And then there was another part of me, which, to your point, how do we keep doing this work? And so that's what I posted about. And I got lots of input. That was one of those posts that actually got a lot of engagement, unlike a lot of things on LinkedIn, because people were conflicted about it, right?
Yeah.
And I got people saying, do not cave in, capitulation in advance is wrong. And I got a lot of people saying the important thing is you keep doing the work, whether you call it inclusion or not. So anyway, I grappled with that, and I decided for that talk and for a couple of others since then, I would be willing to change the title as long as I didn't have to change anything else in the talk. And that's exactly what they made good on that. They said, we stand by everything you say. And so I changed that title. And then I was asked again, not long after it, to change the talk title again for a big webinar that I was doing for thousands of people. And they were, again, this will live forever on our website. Can we get the word inclusion out of it? And yes, let's take a pause just to acknowledge that it is shocking to even be asked to remove the word inclusion.
I
Right?
know because like when someone asks you to remove it, it's like my brain goes to what are you really saying to me? Like what are you really saying to me? Like, but then the devil's advocate in my brain comes in and has to say, Abiola, it's a little more nuanced than that. It's a little more black and white, than that. But still, that initial reaction, that gut reaction of something that I hold as one of my core values, right? And
Yep.
just how I see life. It's like when you're asking that, like, what? It's like, is that okay? And is it okay? Because here's where okay, Minette, here's where I struggle as well because I am a people leadership consultant. That's how I title myself. I don't title myself. Before that, I used to say I title myself as an equity and inclusion consultant. The shift in that title, and this is me being very vulnerable and open here. So if people want to come at me, come at me. We can talk about it, you know? But the shift in that title for me did not happen. And I want to be very clear, it did not happen because of anything that was going on in the world, right? The shift in the title happened because of the evolution of my business. and who I was serving and what we were looking for and what exactly was happening within my business, right? But not gonna lie, when everything was going down stateside, right? I kind of started to feel like a fraud a little bit because I changed. I was like, oh, how dare I change the name? Oh shit.
Yeah.
What are people gonna think? They'll be like, oh, she gave it up because of this. But that wasn't the case, right? And I was just like, well, do I explain myself? Do I? And I never have because I don't, and I never, the reason I never have is because I don't think I need to. I'm talking about it now because we're having this conversation and I did say it's going to be unfiltered and honest. So I like to live up to that. Right. And
Right.
so I think I've been torn as well. So one of the things I always say, though, and it's what I've meant, and I said it at the beginning, everything I've done has always been rooted in these values. It comes across in everything I do. The people who I align with, the people who, I have these conversations with, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you can't tell that these are part of my values, then you're not really listening to me. So I don't know. I just feel like me aside, like there's so much nuance in it. Like how can we get upset or how can we like be like, don't remove the language when we don't have all the entire story about they're
Right.
why they're asking for it, why they're, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's where that was certainly the calculation I was doing as I was thinking about, am I gonna be a purist and say, "No, I won't do your talk because I won't change the title?" But also understanding, to your point, where they're coming from. Like, they wanna do the right thing, and they also you have huge amounts of funding at
Yeah.
risk, and that will prevent them from being able to support education in their state. So that is nuanced, right? I mean, do we
Yeah.
really want to impact the ability to educate children in an entire state
Exactly.
because of language? So I think it's really complex, and above all, it pisses me off and makes me angry that we even have to have these conversations, and
Exactly.
that's the reality we're living in. So how do we navigate this? And what's very interesting about you had changed the way you describe your business based on what you were doing, not
Yeah.
based on someone policing your language. Since all of this happened, I've had lots of people give me unsolicited advice, as people love to do. And they say, Minette, you need to rebrand yourself, like rebrand your website, get rid of the word
Mm,
inclusion, get that off of
yeah.
there. Well, first of all, I have a book. People have actually said you should re-release your book with a new title.
No,
To
they
which I say,
didn't.
no, thank you. I am standing by my book, The Boldly Inclusive Leader. There's a part of me that, in some ways, wishes I had never called it that, not because of what's going on in the US, but
Right.
because of the fact that it gets niched into the DEI category of books when it's
Right.
really what I think is about great leadership.
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe I should never have called it that in the first place. But
Yeah.
now that everything DEI related is under attack, I am
Yeah.
not going to re release my book with a new title. I am doubling down on
Yeah.
the fact that inclusive leadership is great leadership. And so I have not rebranded how I appear on LinkedIn, my website. I have not taken down that language. And yes, of course, a lot of this is impacting our businesses. I mean, anyone I know who does work related to those words, diversity, equity, inclusion, our businesses have been impacted in the US
Oh, yes.
because people are dropping these programs or shying away from these programs. For me, I am not going to rebrand myself because I feel like that would be capitulation in a way that I couldn't live with.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a choice, right?
Yeah.
And we make the choice that is best for us and for what we need to do at this point. I mean, and again, even that statement that I just made is so nuanced as well. Because I think that's gonna become my I have one favorite word that I always use, which is iterate, but I feel like now nuance is gonna be my second favorite word because I keep saying it all the time. And I think I say it a lot because it's true. It's true that we we are in this space that like you said, you double down, right? You're like, no, I'm not changing, I'm not releasing my book. But then there are others who are like, especially organizations, think foundations, profits, who for them, by keeping it, it's more about who it harms the most. It doesn't harm the nonprofit itself or the foundation itself as badly as it harms the people who they serve, the people who need the support, right? Because if they lose their funding, certain fundings, that funding was not, for them to put in their pockets. It was for them to support, certain communities.
Right.
And if that's lost, then what do we do? So if it's about, just dropping a word so I can continue to support this community to help them, to uplift them, to help them elevate, to help them, whatever the cause is, then shouldn't we drop the word?
Yeah, and so let me jump on that one. So on that, I'm okay. I mean, I understand, and I think there's also a lot of what's been happening, especially in the corporate world, is well, two things. Two things that I've been seeing with clients and with people that I talk to is there are some organizations that went all in on DEI back in 2020 when it was popular. The murder of George Floyd kicked off this huge DEI popularity, right? And a lot of it was, oh, we got to get on the bandwagon. We have to have our Black Lives Matter statement on our website and, all this stuff that was performative. And a lot of those organizations, the minute Trump came into office this year and said DEI is dead, they just dropped their programs because they never believed in them in the first place. So that's one swath of the corporate population. And then there's another that they really meant it, and maybe they had DEI programs pre 2020, and many of them did. And some of them rebranding the way they talk about the language, and they are still doing the work and they are still committed to the work. So I want to be clear about that. I'm seeing, and you probably are too, these two paths that organizations are taking. And like, I get the corporations and organizations that are saying, maybe we're not calling it DEI, especially the acronym. It's like the acronym has become toxic, but you can still use some of the other language. Like we can talk about inclusion, we can talk about we just can't talk about DEI. The ones that are still doing that work, those are the ones who are still hiring people like me.
Right.
And the ones who never meant it in the first place, they're just washing their hands of it. Like, yeah, we don't have to deal with that stuff. Are you seeing that same thing, Abbiola?
Oh, 10%. I remember when it first started and people were very up in arms every time we saw another organization dropping their DEI initiatives, right? They're saying they're dropping these initiatives. And my question was always, well, yes, of course we get upset, right? At first, the initial reaction. But then taking a step back, one of the things I was actually in conversation with a friend of mine, and I said, you know what? I would love to see, they're dropping these initiatives, but I'd love to see behind the curtain of what those initiatives actually looked like.
Yeah.
And you know what? If they were just like this, slapdash, whatever, some throw a workshop at you here and there kind of thing, not really putting any thought or budget behind it or anything like that, then you know what? Okay, go ahead and drop your initiative. Because as you said, actually you're showing who you really are. This was not a priority for you in the first place, right? So okay, then do you, right? That's, if that's the case. But then there's the ones where externally they have to, like you said, they have to shift something around, shift language and stuff like that. But they're still quietly doing the work, or they should be. Because what I'm also seeing is, and this is maybe in the third group or like adjacent to this second group, because what I'm also seeing is those that are saying that they're still for it, but they're not going to be overly vocal externally. However, internally, they are slowly stripping things away internally as well, right? And leaving it kind of up to the leaders, the managers, the directors, the people to kind of navigate on their own and kind of really figure out, okay, so where are we actually, what do we actually have to say? What do we actually do? How does this really affect how does this affect my team? Like, what am I doing? Like, am I how am I supposed to lead my team when I'm not really sure, are we still doing this or are we not
Right.
doing this? So do we still put budget behind like things that, workshops for them or included in our like um internal like learnings or our, like little things like that. Like what exactly, I feel like that's the third like bulk where things are just so even internally. It's like we're doing it, but we're not. We're not like where are we internally? Even though externally we're kind of. I'm also seeing that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and that's so problematic because then, there's just such an uneven experience within an organization, and then you leave your
Exactly.
poor managers not knowing what to do and how to behave and what do we care about, and yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. I'm really interested to know if anyone who's out there watching right now has any experiences they want to share with
Yeah.
us or other scenarios. So, I would say please put stuff in the chat because we
Yes.
see what we see, but it's always interesting
Mhm.
to hear what other people are experiencing. I mean, one organization that I was very happy to hear, like when I first talked to their head of culture, they were saying, "Yeah, we are changing our language."
Mhm.
But they're really not backing away from what's important in
Mhm.
terms of equity, diversity, inclusion, and they're keeping all the programs for trainings and things like that. So none of that is
Mhm.
going on while
Yeah.
shifting some of the language. And they're a very
Yeah.
big organization, so they're under a lot of
Mhm.
scrutiny. Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. It's tough, and I'd like to one of the things from the organizational standpoint, yes, I think it's tough. I think one of the things I'm thinking about as well, and I kind of brought it up a little bit, is from the individual standpoint too. Because as you said, it gets confusing. And it also gets as what do I fight for, and what do I not? So I do one-on-one coaching, right? So these are these are questions that I get asked. My clients have asked. Like what do I where do I put my energy?
What kind of questions are they asked? Like, are there specifics that they're asking in terms of like what should I fight for versus not?
I can't well, it's confidential, so I can't, give you, like, a specific thing, but
Uh-huh.
more in terms of values-wise, right?
Mm.
Like, what do I fight for in terms of like, do I stand up for certain things, like, values-wise, like inclusion, equity, if it seems like it's on shaky ground, I guess, within the organization? Or do I just stay quiet and maybe put my energy elsewhere? Because it's especially for those who this is a part of their values as well, and they
Yeah.
wanna keep fighting, but they're like, "I'm tired. I don't wanna
Yeah, I mean,
fight."
it's exhausting. It's exhausting when you're not supported in that fight, right? Like if you care deeply about
Exactly.
something and you're not getting support from your leadership. And I think the other thing that I keep coming back to, because we did start out with language, and I want to come back to language for a minute, is
Yeah.
like if you unpack these words and you just think about their opposites, right? So
Mhm.
let's just say
Yeah.
diversity, right? If we don't care
Yeah.
about diversity, that means that we value homogeneity, right? Like we
Yeah.
value that everyone is alike in some way. And if you
Mhm.
ask people that, I think most people and most organizations would say, no, we don't want that. I mean, there's so much data to back up the fact that
Yeah.
diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams. So, okay,
Right.
that's just one word. And then think about equity. Like, okay, if we don't want to use the word equity, does that mean we're okay with inequity? And, just take it a very simple example of like two people doing a man and a woman doing the same job. Are we okay with paying the man more as we traditionally have? Like, if you
Hmm.
ask these very specific
Yeah.
questions, most people would say, no, that's not right. It's not just,
Yeah.
it's not fair. But they're okay with these blanket statements like, no. And then
Yeah.
inclusion, the opposite of inclusion is exclusion.
Yeah.
Are we comfortable that several people within our own small teams are feeling excluded on a day to day basis? Is that okay? Most people would say no, right? I think when even if you I think you kind of have to go down a level from like the big lofty terms and really
Mhm.
look at like, what does this mean day to day if we
Yeah.
don't value diversity, if we don't value equity, and if we don't value inclusion? What are those opposites that we are now saying are acceptable? And that's what I can't live with. That's where I'm like, I'm pushing back
Oh,
pretty darn hard, right?
100%. And I know I could not live with myself if I was in a space where they're like, "No, we can't do these things," but, well, are we doing the opposite? Those opposites I don't know how to work like that. Just not part of my DNA to be able to work in that way at all. And I think that comes because 'cause I'm wondering, right? It's easier said than done, right? Yes, we can personally believe, hold strong to equity, inclusion, diversity, all the things, belonging, just all the things, right? But if you're in a space where you can't even name them out loud, then what does that mean for your commitment? How easily is it to shake commitments when you're in a space that can't name it or not? And also, because here's the thing with a lot of this, people are in different stages of this work, right? People are in different stages of how they are moving from that awareness of that these things are happening within their orbit and it's not just within like the system. It's not just this big lofty term that they're hearing, but it's something that it's affecting within their orbit, within your team, if you're sticking with the workplace, outside of the workplace, within your family, within your among your friends. So some people are now and still in that awareness stage. And they haven't gotten to the stage where it's fully this is who I am and I'm working to continuously take action on this. So when you're still in that kind of awareness now beginning to walk and someone pushes you down and be like, "No, don't like it." It's like a baby, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that again. Don't say that anymore. How do you continue to push through that? There may not be an answer for that because I mean, it depends on the person, of course, but it's just a thought that's going through my head because I feel like so many people are still there because we talk about these terms in ways that sometimes I'll be real with you, sometimes it feels like they are not accessible to everyone.
That's
The
right.
way we speak about that, I'll use the generic word to say that. The way that it's spoken about. It feels like maybe too academic or too idealistic or too whatever. And I think because of that, there are still people in that phase that for them, it's just, I don't know. It's just not, how do they keep moving forward? Because they know they want to, but what do I do? I wish I had an easy
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer to that, and I think
answer.
that another situation that is very common is that DEI as a concept and all of the programs that were put in place backfired in many ways because
Yeah.
they did not invite everyone in. Like when
No.
I
Yeah.
talk about inclusion, I talk about inclusion broadly. This means inclusion for all. But I will say there were some very, very ill-advised DEI things that happened where they inadvertently excluded every man or every white man or every
Yep.
white woman. Like, you're not part of this because
Mhm.
this is about people of color or this is for gender equity or whatever it is. And so inadvertently, we caused all this backlash because we were not
Absolutely.
inclusive to everyone, and that, I think, is part of, like, men feeling like they can't even be allies because they're being demonized, or
Yeah.
white women are the biggest part of the problem, and, I'll tell you something that happened to me when I started doing this work, because I started my business after leaving tech. I started my business in
Mhm.
2020, so it was funny timing that it
Okay.
was when all this stuff was
Yeah.
going on. And I decided my focus was inclusive leadership because I had seen so much exclusion in the tech world where I worked for 30
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
One of the things I was actually told to my face was, "You can't do this work as a white woman. Only people of color can do DEI work." And I was,
Mhm.
okay, my initial reaction was defensiveness. But then with
Yeah.
curiosity, my question back was, don't we need everybody to be doing this work? Like, my
Mhm.
goal is to invite everyone into this work. so
Yeah.
that we can all do better together. But I mean, it was a really interesting perspective that white people know, right? So I mean, that I think has been part of what alienated so many people from jumping in and doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I heard a story from someone where they mentioned that they were part of a training where they split the room based on the color of their skin.
Oh god.
And they basically, the facilitator told the non-melanated people, I'll just put it in that way, the non-melanated people, that they are the problem and they have caused harm to the melanated people on the other
Right?
side of the room. When my colleague told me that story, my heart dropped and I got so angry. I'm like, tell me the name of this person because they are gonna, I don't even know what to say, but that is a problem. That is a problem. You
Yeah, how are you gonna
can't-
bring people along to do the work if you're I mean, and you know what? There is so much truth to it. Yes. And that is not how you invite people to be
That is
part of the
not
solution,
how
right?
to do it.
Right, right. But there was a lot of that. There was so much of that. And I do think that now that we're in 2025 and we're dealing with all this anti-DEI backlash, is like that's part of it is that some of these programs were so alienating to so many
Yeah.
people that people are kind of relieved. Phew, we don't have to do that shit anymore, right? I mean,
Well,
sorry, but I think there's some of that.
there is. There absolutely is. I think it's sad that those are the programs where that have gotten, that are louder than the ones that, people like yourself, people like myself, people like Sarah, who was in the comments earlier, run, right? I can think of a lot of other people as well who actually run programs with intention
Yeah,
and with honestly inviting everyone in to the conversation because everyone needs to be in the conversation.
that's right.
That's what this is about. And here's the thing, everyone needs to be in the conversation, but also knowing that some people are going to be uncomfortable, some
Yep.
people are going to get defensive, but also supporting through how do you move through that
Exactly,
as
because we
well.
will. We so true. I mean, a lot of
Oh,
my no, and a lot of my work is actually acknowledging that discomfort
right.
because we will. We're gonna all get out of our comfort zones. The minute we start to expand our minds and spend time with people who are not like
Mhm.
us, we will be challenged, right? And the first thing when we get challenged is that we get defensive. And so actually a lot of my work on inclusion is about managing our defensiveness and
Yeah.
how do we get curious instead of defensive
Yes.
because it comes up for all of us. So like for me when someone said white women can't do inclusion work, my immediate response is defensiveness and wanting to fight back. And then I had to actually pause and get curious to understand, okay, what's behind that, right? And
Mm,
like don't just yell at the person, but like try to understand that from their perspective. And that's
yes.
the only way we can have dialogue, right? And move forward.
Yeah. Because it's coming from somewhere.
Yes, of course,
It's
it's not just them.
coming
They're not
from
evil, right?
I'm watching Lucifer on Netflix right now, so my brain just kind of
There's some evil, but mostly not evil, right?
but no, yes. No, but true, right? Because and where it's coming from is valid because that's their experience.
Exactly.
You can't tell someone their experience is not valid if you haven't experienced what they experienced. Like
Exactly.
point blank period, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's wild out there, but I think
That's the
I
quote of the day. It's wild out.
it really is. It is, but I think also it may be wild out there, but for some reason, unbeknownst to me, I don't know. I always wanted to use that in a sentence. I hope I used it right. But I still have hope. I still have hope for us. I still have hope because there are people like you out there. There are people like me out there.
Like you out
know,
there.
and
Exactly.
there are people who in my circle of people who have been on other episodes, people who are coming up there are people like you all out there. That gives me hope because
Yeah.
I always say I'm not an activist. Like that's not my role. I'm not out there in the streets doing that kind of thing. That's not my role. My role is as a guide and a teacher. That's how I see my role. And with each workshop that I run, with each client that I coach, with each organization that I consult with, I believe in the ripple effect. So keep it within my orbit and I believe in that ripple effect. So even if one person, takes something roots in them and they start leading, rooted in these values, whatever we want to call them, whatever the language is, but we're going to call them equity and inclusion over here. That's what, you know, or if equity is too much for you as well, fairness, sometimes
Fairness is a good
I
one.
feel fairness is a good one, but the fact that that's taken roots and that's now going off and they get to influence or just speak to, or just in the actions that they take
The actions.
right? That, and maybe they do that to two other people, and then it goes. That's where I have hope. And similar, because I know I'm not the only one doing it. That the work, Minette's out there doing it, so I know Minette's book is in someone's hands, and they open it, they read, and they're like, right? That's ripple effect going, and that's why I think I still have hope for all of it.
I do
Because
too.
of
And we did not coordinate this. And I am
no,
so thrilled you used the term ripple effect because this is
yeah,
funny. The first talk, when they asked me to rename it, I
yeah.
called it the ripple effect, which is wild that you just brought that up. But I was actually thinking about when I think about because it was about inclusive leadership. And when I think
Yeah,
about the behaviors of an inclusive leader, they can be very small things that have this
yeah,
large ripple effect.
exactly.
And I think that is what gives me hope is like even a small change in how you
Mhm,
speak to someone, how you listen to
mhm,
someone, how you deal with feedback, whatever it is,
yeah,
that has these far reaching consequences, which is what the
exactly.
ripple effect is. And that the other
Yes,
thing that I love, I actually looked up the ripple effect when I thought about that title.
yeah,
It can have unforeseen
yes,
consequences. And so
yeah,
my guidance and in my talk
mhm,
and in my workshop is like let it
mhm,
not be unconscious and unforeseen. Let it be
yeah.
deliberate in how we want
Oh,
to ripple out in the world, right? Let us choose how we want to have our behaviors ripple out.
yes,
So I love that you
yes,
are seeing
yes,
that same thing.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. I usually use it in conjunction with the Aesop fable, the crow and the water jug. Do you know that one?
I don't
Right?
remember that one. I don't remember that one.
I'll give you the 30-second
Okay.
and for those out there who don't know it, but basically the crow is flying around, it's thirsty, it sees a water jug and it only has like this much water in it. Right. So the crow's beak can't fit in to reach the water. So the crow looks on down on the ground and sees a pebble. It takes that pebble and drops it into the water jug, right? And then flies back down, takes another, because it can only hold one at a time in its beak, right? So another keeps dropping it, dropping, back and forth, back and forth. It takes time, takes a lot of time, but by the time, little by little, that water rises to a point where the crow can now drink. So one pebble at a time,
Yep, exactly.
that effect that the water is rising, it could ripple out. We can say rippling out, but small change, big difference. The crow was
Big
now
impact.
not thirsty anymore. So yeah, that's how I see it. That's how I use it because I feel like yes, we may be tired. I was just saying that to a friend of mine this morning. We were talking about how tired we were, but the hope is still there. It's still there deep down you know? And I love that the conversation ended up somewhere here because I feel like I need some hope in to remind myself of that. All right. I want to shift gears just a little bit and I would love to jump in to say it with your whole chest. So I don't know what you're going to say. So for those who are new and watching the replay, or if you're live and quiet and shy, that's all right too. Because I am too when I'm watching these things. So it's okay. I'm just like listening and nodding along and saying it out loud instead of typing it. That's okay. But so this is the kind of like the bold segment of our line where I ask all of my guests to like drop the polite filter. I don't feel like we've had it. And just say something that you think needs to be said, something that you may have not said, or you may have said to a small amount of people, or you may have been saying it all along, but you want to say it here too. So the floor is yours.
Okay. And I know you said you were going to ask me this, so I've been pondering what I might say. And there's so many things I might say, actually, because there are lots of things that like kind of get me riled up. But I picked one that I want to share, which is
Yeah.
I want to bust the myth of the meritocracy because, and what this is so much I've been hearing over the years. I heard it when I was in tech. I've heard it from the Trump administration. I've heard it from leaders who say, enough of this DEI stuff, enough of like trying to get the diversity hire in here. We're going to hire the best and the brightest. And we are not going to lower our standards to hire a woman or a person of color or someone neurodivergent. We're going to hire the best and best. So what I want to bust the myth of is that there really is a meritocracy in that how hiring is done and how promotions are done, because it is so much done based on bias and based on I like you because you're like me. And I mean, I saw this, I see it, I still see it. Why should we hire a woman when we have 9 great men on our team? Why should and why would a woman want to join that team, by the way?
Yeah.
But I heard so many times, like in the tech industry, when I was saying, we have a really small percentage of women in these senior positions, and getting pushback. Well, we can't find good women. We can only find good men. You believe that? Yeah, I don't. I think you're looking in the wrong places. I also think the bar is different. I've seen this bar of like, this guy's got great potential and we're going to hire him. And this woman, well, I've never seen her do this work. And so we're going to give her 2 more years to see if she can do this work before we would consider putting her in. Is this a meritocracy? No, that's the reality of what we're dealing with. So I want to just challenge that head on when you say, this is a meritocracy and we're hiring and promoting the best and the brightest. I want to call bullshit on that. And I want you to really examine your systems and your biases and how are you setting the bar for the people that you're bringing in and promoting and giving stretch assignments to, because it's usually the people who are just like you and that you're most comfortable. That's what I had to get off my chest today.
Period. You said that so eloquently. I don't even period, because it's true. When you say you're hiring the best and the brightest, are you really? Because if you think about it, sometimes the best and the brightest, they don't look like you.
Exactly. They don't.
And
they don't agree with you. They don't talk like
Exactly.
you, whatever.
And do you hire them?
No, they make you uncomfortable.
And your bias tells you, well, they really couldn't be the best and the brightest because, well, I don't know why I feel like that, but I just feel like they
Exactly. Oh, it's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. They're not going to fit in, right? Or they're not like one of us. Yeah.
I've heard that. No, I love it. I love it. Tell it.
And it comes from just like, I mean, I've sat in so many meetings when I was in leadership in tech where we would be having these discussions about like who's going to get promoted. Not even hiring, just like who's going to get promoted.
Yeah.
And you'd hear like, oh yeah, he's really great. Why is he so great? It's because he speaks up a lot. We all know him because he's sort of in this inner circle. And then you're talking about someone, and it's not always women. So I was saying she, but like, oh, there's this guy who's really quiet and who's in a different office, who's outside the US. And people are like, well, I don't know him. Well, you don't know him because he's in a different office and he's not loud in our all hands meetings. Would you like to get to know like what he's really good at or what they are really good at? No, because they're just not top of mind, right? So I remember fighting. So I mean, actually just getting into fights with my colleagues about like, I need to talk to you about this person you don't know, but they should be considered for this role or for this promotion, right?
Yeah. And isn't that what inclusion is about?
Exactly. Which is honestly what informed me to do this work. Is like I saw so much exclusionary behavior, really unfair, just say unfair behavior. And I mean, I really feel like a lot of the time when it's called out and when people are open, because they do have to be open-minded enough to hear it. It's like, I never thought of that, right? Okay, I didn't, I'm seeing something new. When they understand, their eyes can be opened and small changes can be made. So and then there's the ripple effect. But that's what made me want to do this work, because I saw there was so much unconscious unfairness, inequity, exclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there. I think, we have to acknowledge that it's there. We have to acknowledge that we all have it. We all have the biases. We all have things that we're just like, that are different from us, that are sometimes we have to like, wait, I've had that multiple
Of
times.
course. We all
You
have.
know,
I've done it. I mean, guilty
right?
as charged, right? We all have
Guilty
it,
as
right? Yeah.
charged. And I think it comes to the point where we have to be able to admit it.
Yep.
And we have to be able to in order to I always go back to Maya Angelou. When you know better, do
Do better.
better. Always. Because it's what it is.
Yep.
Because once we
Exactly.
know, we see, okay, how can we do better?
Yep.
You know?
Exactly.
So it's the same no matter, and you know what, just to kind of, as we're wrapping up, I feel like that's like a good reminder for us, especially, and for those who are, leaders, directors, whatever your title is, right? If you know better and you're trying to do better, right? It doesn't matter what you call it. At this
Right.
point, keep doing. I would say just keep doing, because the language has shifted multiple times over the years.
And language evolves, as we know.
Language evolves.
Let's not get stuck. Yeah.
Exactly. Have you talked to a Gen Alpha lately? I have. My nephew's niece. Language evolves.
Exactly. And I need a translator.
And I need a translator. So, but please, if there's nothing else you take from this, keep doing.
Yeah.
Keep
Keep fighting the good fight. That's what
fighting. Keep
yeah.
walking in your values and acting. All right, Minette, this was so great. I could keep talking to you for hours and hours and hours, but I also want to be mindful of your time, my time, everyone else's time, right? But before we wrap, please tell the folks all the things about how they can connect with you, how they can find you, and how they can get your
Oh, yes, books. Yeah. So you can connect with me on here on LinkedIn. You can find my website, minettenorman.com, and it's just my name spelled out, MINETTENORMAN.com. My books are available on all the online websites, whether you're on Amazon or not. You can get it everywhere else as well. So I know a lot of people are not buying from Amazon. Bookshop.org right now is having, I think, an anti Prime free shipping thing right now. So anyway, all the online book sites. And I have two books. So I did write The Boldly Inclusive Leader, but I also co-wrote The Psychological Safety Playbook, and all those books are all available online. So please connect, please reach out if I can help you in any way, because I love to do this work and I'm so energized by fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Minette. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you in the audience if you're um listening to the replay. I would love for you to comment, to chime in, put your comments in the chat. If you're watching live and you're just listening in and doing other things and you weren't able to comment, feel free to drop your comments in later on. I am so thank you so much for aligning with us. And of course, if you're a manager, a people leader, or someone who's been told to quiet down those values that you care about, the space was for you, because, whether we say the words out loud or not, these are the principles that, that we're rooted in, that how should I say this? That as we take action, our actions are rooted in these principles. That's what I'm trying to say. Our actions are rooted in these principles. So the way you show up matters. You
Yeah.
matter. And your leadership matters. It matters. And, on my end, this is the type of work I do with managers and organizations every day, helping folks lead in ways where they feel aligned, even when the language changes, because leadership rooted in values, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't go anywhere, right? It needs support. That's what it needs. So if you're navigating these shifts or just trying to figure out how to lead with integrity in a climate where things are just so uncertain these days, like whether it's through coaching, workshops, we'll figure out support looks like for you at Fern Education Studios. So you can check me out, ferneducationstudios.com, and we will be back again for another episode. And until then, my friends, keep lining, listening, and learning. And Minette, thank you again so much for being part of it.
Thanks for having me. I
Of
appreciate you
course.
so much.
You too. Thank you. All right, peeps. See ya. Have a wonderful day.